You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. Bitcoin, Ether, Ripple, Litecoin, and more. Cryptocurrencies and other digital assets are taking the financial world by storm. This exploding market provides everything a savvy trader needs: volatility, volume, and liquidity. Provided you know how to find it. That's where we come in. Welcome to the Crypto Rundown. Each week, we'll break down the latest trading activity, trends, and developments on everything from coins to tokens, futures, and even OTC options. If it's moving the crypto markets, then you'll find it on the Crypto Rundown. This program is brought to you by Genesis Volatility, also known as GVol, home of institutional-grade crypto options analytics. Whether you're trading CeFi options or DeFi options, cryptocurrencies move. Use GVol Analytics to analyze implied volatility, model realized volatility, structure positions, and unlock alpha. For more information, visit gvol.io. That's GVOL.io. Now it's time to dive into the exploding world of cryptocurrencies and digital assets. It's time for the Crypto Rundown.
All right, everybody. That music means it is time once again for the Crypto Rundown, the program here on the Options Insider Radio Network, where we move beyond our traditional stomping grounds of your SPYs and your VIX and your Tesla options. Look a little further afield, see what's going on in the world of them, our crypto derivatives, and indeed beyond. My name is Mark Longo from theoptionsinsider.com, as well as, of course, from the ever-exciting network upon which so many of you are binging these days. Remember, available on a wide array of platforms on pretty much any frequency you want. If you want it on demand, it's available on just about every on-demand platform under the sun. Your Apple Podcasts, your Googles, your Spotifys, your smart speakers, your YouTubes, you name it. It's out there. Of course, you want to join us live for this show, everything else throughout the week, our pro Q&As, our options oddities, our giveaways, everything else. Theoptionsinsider.com/secret club is the place to go to learn more about all that. And of course, if you like what you hear, keep rating and reviewing your platform of choice. We are seeing new people discovering these markets all the time. I have to imagine a few of those crypto ads over the Super Bowl going to send more people our way these days. So it is more important than ever to keep those ratings and reviews coming. Of course, we also want to hear from you folks. So keep sending in those questions, those comments, those pearls of wisdom. We do love to hear from all of you guys and gals out there. Let's see who we're hearing from on the show today. It is time to roll out the Crypto Hot Seat.
Forget about cold storage. It's time to turn up the heat on thought leaders from the world of cryptocurrencies and digital assets. It's time to take their place on the Crypto Hot Seat.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Crypto Hot Seat, the portion of the show we welcome on guests from throughout the world of crypto derivatives and indeed beyond to proceed to pick their brains for the benefit of you, the listener. And our next guest is a newcomer to the program and indeed to the network. He is Dan O'Prey, the Chief Product Officer for Crypto over there at Bakkt. Dan, welcome to the Crypto Rundown program.
Thanks so much, Mark. Great to be here and pleasure to be in the hot seat.
Yeah, it's fun. Finally have someone from Bakkt joining us on the show. It's been quite some time. But Dan, like I mentioned, this is your first appearance on the network, and as we are wont to do with all of our first-timers, why don't you give our audience a little bit of an overview of your background in the financial and indeed the crypto space, as well as what it is you do day to day over there at Bakkt?
Sure thing. Well, I'll start at the end. As you said, I'm the Chief Product Officer for crypto here at Bakkt. So Bakkt has sort of three product groups: crypto, loyalty and rewards, and payments. And we're fairly unique as a platform in that we really deal with the sort of intersection of all three of those different areas. I joined about 7 months ago or so, just before we went public late last year on the New York Stock Exchange. I've been in the sort of wider crypto blockchain space for about 8 years now, actually. So it sort of started back in 2014, getting interested in Bitcoin, really looking at what could be done in this space, then started to explore, ultimately the underlying technology. That led me to starting what's sort of now known as enterprise blockchain or permission blockchain company called Hyperledger. And that was acquired by a company called Digital Asset, where I was there for about 6 years. So been working across the space from multiple different angles, looking primarily with financial institutions, regulated entities, stock exchanges, clearing houses, how they can adopt both the underlying technology and blockchain, and now focused very much on crypto specifically.
Well, we've watched Bakkt with great interest ever since your inception. You guys really helped kind of get the listed crypto derivatives ball rolling here in the U.S. You were really the first out of the gate with a physically delivered, a physically settled type contract, which was a thing a lot of people had been waiting for. There were a lot of hodlers out there who were sitting on Bitcoin, for example, and they wanted a way to get out of it, but maybe perhaps a little bit of income stream too. So things like covered calls and other types of trades where their contract could actually be called away. That was very enticing for them. So a lot of people were very excited at the launch of Bakkt with the futures and then indeed with the options. And we kind of waited for the volume to materialize, and then we didn't really see that volume materialize. And of course, as you mentioned, you joined last year. Last year was a very interesting time for Bakkt because the firm as a whole kind of pivoted away from that core crypto exchange function and added in a number of other functions, as you mentioned, loyalty, other things. You kind of became, I guess, for lack of a better term, the one wallet to rule them all, the one wallet where you could put your crypto, but also, let's say, your loyalty points for your hotel chain. So a very interesting year. Dan, what prompted that bit of evolution, that bit of pivot away from the core crypto exchange function to embracing all these other ideas within the same wallet?
Yeah, great question. So, as you mentioned, we're about 3.5 years old now. We originally spun out of ICE, the Intercontinental Exchange, that I'm sure your listeners are very familiar with. So we had that sort of background, history, and pedigree in the sort of institutional space, and started off very much focusing on Bitcoin in terms of custody and physically settled futures, as you mentioned. But really, over the course of the last 3 years, the market started to sort of expand, and we started to look at how can we play a role in not just mainstreaming crypto, but bringing it to consumers through our B2B2C model. And as you say, sort of that vision of connecting the digital economy of crypto is an important big piece of that, but there's multiple other forms of value of assets that are maybe digitized, maybe not, that users can hold and access and really get utility from. So in some ways, seeing, air miles and loyalty points, most Americans are very familiar with these. They've owned them, they hold them. Crypto's, until recently, much more new and exotic and to some scary. So sort of bringing them all into the same wallet alongside each other really helps to normalize crypto as an experience and allow you to move between different asset classes rather than just sort of the pure play crypto exchange, as you said.
Well, you mentioned you joined last year. Last year was, I think, to put it mildly, a topsy-turvy year for the crypto markets. We had rallies and then sell-offs and then rallies again and then sell-offs again. Volatility went all over the place. You guys over there at Bakkt compounded that. You mentioned going public through a SPAC and all the other attention that brought to you over there. So looking back at the crazy, insane year that was 2021, I'm trying to get the pulse of all of our guests. This is obviously your first time joining us here. So I'd like your thoughts on For you, what were some of the highlights and lowlights for Bakkt, and for you from a crypto perspective, looking back at the insane year that was 2021, Dan?
Yeah, no, it was a very insane year amongst many, but probably, as you say, more insane than usual. So I think, really, it always feels like we're sort of on the cusp of mainstream adoption, but really over the last, I'd say 6 months, 9 months in particular, that's really just sort of compounded. And now the sort of the types of entities that we've seen, Bitcoin ETFs being launched, the types of entities that are getting into this space, regulated financial institutions offering their products. It was a huge, year for mass adoption and really sort of breaking out from that hardcore crypto enthusiast into everyday regular people. Always a lot of turbulence in terms of the price and volatility in this space. Nothing new there, but I think long term we're starting to see that sort of settle down a little bit. And with Bakkt, going public was a fantastic experience for everyone involved. But really, that was the start of the journey of being a public company, and following that up with our partnership announcements with MasterCard, where we're working with them to provide crypto rewards on the back of credit card transactions and other reward schemes. Really being the sort of platform powering the crypto components behind the scenes. Likewise with Finastra and Fiserv as well, working to integrate with them to bring crypto trading to their community of community banks and credit unions. And really, having gone public, raising that capital, and being in a position with the level of partners that we have now is hugely exciting to actually execute and make this real and bring it to the mainstream over the course of 22.
Well, you mentioned that process to bring crypto to the mainstream, to create this one wallet, which is their gateway for everything. Like I mentioned, the restaurant points and let's say your ETH holdings and whatever else NFTs you want to throw into that wallet. How is that process going? How are you progressing along that track to this mainstream acceptance and adoption of this one wallet to rule them all, Dan? Which, by the way, you can borrow that in your marketing if you like.
Well, there'll always be multiple wallets, I'm sure, but as long as we're one of them, we'll be very happy. But so been making great progress, as you mentioned. We started with just Bitcoin. We added Ether late last year as well, and I've seen great traction around that, both on the sort of institutional and retail side. We had a couple of announcements with both Choice Hotels and Wyndham Hotels about paying with points and converting those into dollars that you can then use to purchase crypto. So we're really starting to see the sort of early stages of that flywheel between different asset classes, and of course we continue to evaluate and look at what other cryptos, what other forms of value that we can bring into the platform and enable people to convert between and really utilize, whether that's through the form of payments or getting rewards in those assets instead of others, or sending peer-to-peer between each other, or even actually getting paid. We had another announcement with Bring Me That, which is a kind of gig economy company where their workers can actually now get paid in crypto directly through the Bakkt platform as well. So we want to be that not just one wallet, but sort of one platform that can enable you, whether you're a crypto native company looking to add non-crypto assets to your platform, or a non-crypto company wanting to get the benefits of being a crypto company and offering that to your users without having to go through all the various licensing, security, technology build-outs that we've already done.
Like I mentioned, Dan, you guys came on our radar very early as being some of the first entrants really into that listed crypto derivative space here in the U.S. So for a lot of our audience, they're still very vested, very interested in that core exchange, that core derivative product offering that you had early on. We were very eagerly anticipating the really kickoff of these products, and the marketplace never really responded with resounding volume that I think a lot of people were looking for the first physically settled contract. So I'm curious for you, Dan, you're the crypto guy over there. Why do you think that was? Why do you think those products never really resonated with the masses? And for a lot of our audience who are still very vested in that side of the space, what can they look forward to from Bakkt? Are there going to be any future tweaks or upgrades to those offerings to perhaps spur some new volume and perhaps a new renaissance in the physically listed and delivered crypto offerings?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and I think, as you said, we were first to market with a regulated futures product, and we really had the sort of philosophy that future products that are built off that, whether ETFs or ETPs, are going to need that regulated price discovery vehicle. And I think, to some extent, we were proven right with the SEC's decision to approve futures-based ETFs, albeit primarily on cash-settled futures. And I think really, if anything, it was maybe slightly too early for the market. There's still, or has been up until recently, some hesitancy to hold physical Bitcoin directly, or hold the underlying challenges around how you account for that on your balance sheet. And the SEC's been quite clear so far that they're not comfortable with either spot ETFs or ETFs holding a sizable portion of Bitcoin on there within the offering. But I think that is starting to change. We've seen many institutions over the last year start to buy and hold Bitcoin directly. Public companies holding it on their balance sheet, and with the opening the door with the cash settled ETFs that are out there today, monitoring the regulatory environment and sort of any potential changes to the attitudes to that over time.
It seems like everything these days, whether you're talking equities and fractional shares, and of course derivatives are not immune to that trend as well, with weeklies and smaller multiplier type contracts out there. Everything seems like the trend is moving in the direction of smaller, more bite-sized type contracts to attract a wider array, particularly in the retail side of the space. I'm curious for you guys at Bakkt, is that something you have discussed, maybe a way to increase or improve some of the volume out there by going to an even smaller, a micro or a more bite-sized type contract, Dan?
Yeah, I can't really say sort of too much about sort of the future plans and product developments at this point in time. We're just coming up on our Q4 earnings call as well, so I got to be can't reveal too much that sort of non-public at this point. But we've explored multiple different ways around the futures contract in particular, and sort of how, particularly and most importantly, sort of how that plays into our core business model of the B2B2C component, ultimately targeting consumers through our partners, and how we can sort of leverage the price discovery there, and offsetting or hedging risk within that market. So I think it's along with our institutional custody business, it's a very key part of our underlying platform. But very much the focus at the moment is on that B2B2C side, and how we can bring these ultimately consumer-facing products to market through the large partnerships that I shared.
Now, you mentioned some of the cash-settled ETFs and other things out there. When you guys launched your product, like I said, a lot of people were very excited because it offered the physically delivered, physically settled version. It seems like since then, a number of products in that area have kind of struggled a little bit. Is it maybe we all collectively overestimated the demand for something that was physically settled? Maybe cash settled is the way the market wants to go. Are you seeing more of the trend going that way instead, Dan?
I think that's clearly been the case until now. As I mentioned, there is some hesitancy to hold the physical underlying amongst certain types of entities, and so cash settled removes the potential for that. But I do think as the market gets more comfortable, we will ultimately start to see that shift over time. But yeah, the futures product is sort of one piece of a much larger product portfolio within Bakkt, and something that we continue to invest in and pay a lot of attention to. And yeah, particularly as the market starts to shift and people get more comfortable. Overall, we're sort of taking a very patient approach on the futures side.
Well, our audience has been very patient. They wanted us to bring Bakkt on for a number of years now, Dan. So I'm glad we could finally get someone from Bakkt on to explain your side of what's going on out there in the crypto space. And before we go, Dan, you mentioned you have your earnings coming up, but is there anything you could leave our audience with in terms of hints or teases or things they could look forward to coming down the pike from you and your team over there at Bakkt? Now is the time, sir. The floor is yours.
Yeah, wow. So I think, really, I mentioned the partnership we have with MasterCard, Fiserv, Finastra. There's many more in the works that will be live soon. And really, it's about sort of scaling up, particularly with banks and financial institutions, bringing the variety of consumer services that we have, embedding them within their applications. So you may not ultimately even know that you're necessarily using Bakkt under the hood. But bringing these products through regulated entities to the market is something that we're delivering on, both the partnerships that we've announced and coming up with many more to follow soon.
Dan, I appreciate you joining us today. Give us a bit of a glimpse behind the curtain over there at Bakkt, and we'll look forward to seeing how all these initiatives and rolling everything into the one wallet, the one platform, as you mentioned, how all of this unfolds in the marketplace in the coming months, Dan.
Thank you so much for having me, Mark. Been a pleasure, and hope to come on down the line.
Yes, we'll definitely look forward to having more folks from Bakkt on down the road. Now we have to keep on rolling, listeners. It is that time. It is time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
It's time to explore the latest trending activity, trends, and developments across the world's leading crypto market. It's time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Bitcoin Breakdown. I hope you enjoyed that. We've been trying to get the folks from Bakkt on for years, ever since they launched that first contract. We used to watch them every episode with the Bakkt volume bot until it became something of a moot prospect, really, at the end of the day. The volume really wasn't there. Interesting to see how this new pivot, how that will impact those products going forward. It does seem like the industry has pivoted away from the physically delivered type contracts as well, which is interesting because there was so much interest. So much excitement in those. People kept saying, finally, I could sell a covered call against my Bitcoin holdings, and I could have it called away. It seemed like there was a lot of interest in that. And, LedgerX still has a nice niche there with that. But it is interesting to see how that space has evolved. Let's see how the big dog, how Bitcoin has evolved this week. Coming into Showtime, listeners, we are seeing a little bit less on the screen than there was this time last week, but not quite the apocalyptic sell-offs we may quite be used to these days. You never know when you come onto the show. We could be down 10, 20, 30% from where we were this time a week ago. This time, not so much. We were down a little over 2,000 handles, about 2,240 points. We were at about a 44,438 at the end of our last show. Coming into start of today's show, we were 42,200 or so. So selling off a couple of thousand points. In the grand scheme of Bitcoin, not an enormous move out there. Over the course of the week, we had a little bit of a range. Again, for Bitcoin, not a ton. We got a little bit shy of 46,000, about 45,800 and change. That was on Thursday of last week, and the low came on Sunday, about 41,000. A little bit shy of 41,600 on Sunday's show. So we had a little bit of a range, but again, not a ton, not a huge amount of movement. So that's going to translate probably into less vol, and that's exactly what we saw. Coming into today's show, the vol right now, the kind of average at the money vol over there on Deribit is a 63%. That's down even from last week, which was a 65%. By the way, of course, all these analytics, this vol and everything else you're going to hear on the show coming at you courtesy of our friends over there at Genesis Volatility. gvol.io is the place to go to kick the tires and light the fires over there. You can run all these numbers for yourself whenever you want. Dive deep into the open interest changes, the skew, historical vol, do searches on historical activity. You can not just Bitcoin too. You can do ETH, you can do other products, not just Deribit. They're adding more venues all the time. So it really is becoming a one-stop shop for all of your crypto derivatives analytics. gvol.io is the place to go. Except for this, if you want to go check out Simon Ho's BitVol, which he likes to put out there as kind of your Bitcoin VIX. You got to go to t3index.com to check that one out. That you'll see that actually is ticking up a little bit as we're seeing a little bit of vol bouncing around. Remember, that's more of utilizing the VIX methodology. So it's a bit of a rolling 30-day implied volatility level with a little bit of skew thrown in there as well. If you don't know what any of that means, check out some of our educational content on this network like Options Bootcamp, Options Playbook Radio. It'll tune you into all that fun stuff. So the BitVol has actually ticked up since our last show. It was about a 72. Now it's a 74. Skew-wise, since we did see a little bit more downside on the screen than upside this week, we are seeing that negative portion of the skew grow a little bit larger. On our last show, we were negative 1.7. Coming into today's show, negative 6.3. So the puts starting to light things up over there in Bitcoin options land. Seeing that reflected over there in Simon's bit skew as well. Last show, it was 91.71. Today, exactly 4 points higher, 95.71. That usually reflects a continued interest in the puts this week in terms of action and trading activity. In terms of the OI, we're seeing about 101,000 calls open on Deribit right now. It's up about 5,000. And the puts are right about 60,000. That's actually down about 5,000 from this time last week. So we have seen a lot of put activity over the course of the week, even if that hasn't materialized in new OI, which is interesting. And in terms of that OI, let's go on out to where the top positions are right now. Where are you folks lining up from an expiration perspective? And it's still March, 52,000 contracts open in March. It's up a little bit shy of 3,000 this week. Number 2, we have February. So folks starting to pile into the nearer dated contracts like February. 35,300 open as of the start of our show. It's up about 5,300 from this time last week. And then June, bringing up the rear, 31, almost 32,000 contracts open in June. It's up about 3,400. I expect to see June continue to fight its way to the top. The quarterlies are always popular out there in crypto land. We'll see that again when we get to ETH in a little bit. And in terms of where you folks are lining up right now, where are the top positions in Bitcoin options right now? Let's find out. Number 5 on our top 5 this week. It is the par strike, the 100,000 strike. 8,500 contracts open. It's up slightly, a couple of hundred from this time last week. Number 4, it is the 40,000 strike with 9,200 contracts open. That's actually down about 700 from this time last week. Number 3, it is the 60,000 strike. So a lot of even money strikes here with about 9,400 contracts open. It's actually up about 800 from this time last week. A lot of back and forth you can see on all these positions. Number 2 is the 30,000 strike with 9,700. It's down 1,300 from this time last week. It's also our biggest mover on the top 5 this week. And number 1 is still the 50,000 strike with 13,000 contracts. That gained about 1,000 this week. So again, ever since December rolled off the board, we've seen a marked evolution in that open interest. It's not just 200,000, 150,000, and 100,000 strike all the time. There's much more relevant strikes open now. 30,000, 40,000, 50,000, things that we've actually seen recently in terms of Bitcoin price levels, as opposed to some, shall we say, optimistic stuff out there. In terms of the volume, it wasn't the most active week out there. In fact, our busiest week was the last show day, February 7th. We had about 21, almost 22,000 contracts going up on Deribit that day. Still, that isn't a lie. If you look back to our previous show before that, January 24th, the high was 37,000 contracts. So kind of a light week out there in Deribit land. Similar story over there at CME when it comes to their products. The Bitcoin options did a whopping 20 contracts on Friday. So not a lot going up, even though the OI is ticking up slightly up to about nearly 1,700, about 1,650 over there right now. Futures, same deal, only 7,000 changing hands on Friday. Remember, it wasn't that long ago. Everyone was really worried that we were going to see things like the ProShares BITO ETF push these futures to their limit. Only 7,000 going up on Friday. So not that crazy of a time. And the OI is pretty much unched, right around 10,000 contracts. It was the same level last week. Micro Bitcoin futures also looking kind of quiet right now. Only about 18,700 going up on Friday. The OI is also ticked down as well, down to about 2,500 contracts to about 14,500 open right now. So a bit of a sleepy week in Bitcoin last week. Let's see if that holds true when we explore the altcoin universe.
It's time to move beyond Bitcoin and find out what's moving the rest of the crypto marketplace. It's time to boldly venture into the altcoin universe.
All right, everybody, it's that time to explore the altcoin universe. Let's begin our journey where we like to do these days, looking at the top 10 out there in terms of market cap. They've changed up a little bit. No real Doge there in the top 10 anymore. I know that'll make some of our listeners sad out there. Instead, number 10 is Avalanche. That might make some of you happy. I know there are some Avalanche proponents out there with about $19.5 billion worth of market cap. Number 9, we've got good old Luna at about 21.25. Number 8, we've got Solana. That one's kind of been all over the place of late, but holding firm today at about 30 billion exactly out there from a market cap perspective. Number 7, Cardano, 34.7 billion. Number 6, XRP. Will they, won't they? Will we ever be able to sink our teeth into XRP again in a legal basis here in the U.S. Everyone's still waiting and seeing for that one. 37.7 billion out there on XRP. Number 5, we've got USD coin, 52.5 billion. Number 4, good old Binance coin, 65.8 billion. Number 3, it's Tether, 78.5 billion. Numero due, it's ETH at about 345 billion. And the big dog, Bitcoin, a little bit lighter this week at a little bit shy of 800 billion, about 798 billion out there. Let's get on out to the number 2, even though I know it's number 1 in a lot of your hearts. It's been interesting to watch ETH over the past couple of months rally and then sell off and then rally and sell off again. A lot of back and forth. Is ETH the next big thing? Are we going to have the flippening? Are we going to have some of these competitors like Solana eat its lunch instead? A lot of back and forth if you follow crypto Twitter. A lot of that there as well. It's been a fascinating time to watch. ETH coming into showtime a little bit lighter than it was this time last show. We're a little bit shy of 2,900 when we kicked off the show, about 2,890 or so. On our last show was about a 3,180. Puts it down almost 300 handles, about 293 or 4 from where we were at this time last week. In terms of range, got as high as about 32.82. That was last Thursday as well. And again, the low was on Sunday at about 28.34. So a bit of a range out there, but nothing enormous when it comes to ETH. And so a lot of kind of hanging around there means the vol is pretty much unched from this time last week. We were at 74 on our last show. This week, a whopping 75. So not a lot of change out there from a vol perspective. From a skew perspective, a bit of a different story. A little bit more negative out there. Last week, it was negative 4.3. It's pretty much doubled now to about almost negative 9, about negative 8.9 out there. So a little bit more action out there in the puts this week as well. We're seeing that reflected this time in the OI as well. The calls are only up about 10,000 contracts to about 1.38 million. The puts are up a whopping 41,000 to 524,000. It's still more than 2-to-1 calls over puts out there, but it does take, it seems like a bit of a protracted sell-off to really get the crypto folks interested in the puts. And that's a little bit of what we're seeing out there right now. And in terms of the action out there, again, it wasn't the most rock'em sock'em week out there when it comes to all things action out there from an activity perspective. When it comes to ETH, last show we saw 319,000 contracts on the tape out there on Deribit. And in terms of meeting it this week, we had our most active day again was the 11th. And you're talking about 222,000 contracts. So a far cry from what we've seen recently. 391,000 on the 21st of January, 378 of the subsequent week. We saw 402,000 on the 24th. This week, about half of that. So a quiet week out there in terms of volume on the Bitcoin, on the Deribit ETH options out there. In terms of where your folks are lining up from an expiration perspective, it's similar to what we're seeing out there in Bitcoin, although June more pronounced here. As you would expect, the quarterlies seem to dominate the ETH OI out there. Number 3 is February. It's catching up. It's doing all right. It's respectable. 369,000 contracts. It's up a whopping 46,000 from this time last week. So folks are piling into nearer dated contracts, which you would expect. You're seeing some movement out there in ETH. You want some high gamma positions, and February is going to do that for you. Number 2 is June, 426,000. That's up a meager 7,000 from this time last week. And number 1 remains March, 604,000 contracts, up about 20,000 from this time last week. Let's break down our top 5 size positions. Where's the big paper hanging out in ETH options right now? Let's find out. Number 5, the 10K strike, has a whopping 102,000 contracts open there, even though that's down 1,000. Number 4 is the 15,000 strike. So we are starting to see still seeing that outlandish paper still open for size in ETH versus Bitcoin. 15,000 strike, number 4, 105,000 contracts open there. That's down about 1,000 as well. Number 3, the 20,000 strikes. There we go. 10, 15, and 20 right in a row with 110,000 contracts open. That's also down 1,000. So they're each down 1,000 pretty much exactly this week, which is kind of interesting. Now we get to some more relevant strikes. So number 2, the 4,000 strike, which is where we've been bouncing around for a while. 116,000 contracts are open there. That's up about 5,000 from this time last week. And number 1 remains the 5K strike. 118,000 contracts open there. That's up about 5,000 as well. So interesting times out there. Not so much from an ETH perspective over there at CME. Let's see how the numbers are looking this week. Only about 4,400 contracts going up on Friday, and the OI is pretty much unched at 3,200 on the big futures. Let's go check out the micros as well to see if we've got a little bit better paper. And the answer is a little bit better. It was a quiet week across the board over there. About 18,700 contracts went up on the micro ETH. Ironically, exactly the same amount with a 30 difference between micro Bitcoin and micro ETH on Friday at CME. Both were 18,700. That's interesting, but both of them also looking kind of light. The OI also drifting down about 4,000 contracts to a little bit shy of 29,000, about 28,800. Again, these are newer contracts. They just launched a couple of months ago on December 6th out there. So it has been interesting to watch the uptake on them, even if it was a little bit light this week. Ripple also looking a little bit lighter this week as well. Coming into showtime, it was down slightly. It was 79.2 cents on our last show, 78.9 cents. So kind of a bit of a rounding error out there in XRP. Not so much in Doge, though. Dogecoin, as you recall, last week, listeners, was in our top 10. Not so much this week. It's down from 17.1 cents to 14.4 cents. So all that love it was getting right back down again. Litecoin, a little bit more aggressive to the dark side. 137.5 last week, 122, pretty much even coming into today's show, down about 15.5 handles from this time last week. Let's run through a couple of the top tenors out there. Cardano was about $1.19 on our last show, $1.03 coming into today's show, so it's 16 cents to the dark side. Polkadot, 22.5 on our last show, a little bit shy of 18.5 now, so off a little over 4, about 4.10 over the course of the past week. So that's quite the hit for Polkadot. Solana also looking lighter this week as well, almost 120 exactly on our last show, 119.90. Coming into today's show is a little bit north of 94. That puts it off 25, almost 26 handles from where it was this time last week. So Solana, once again, exhibiting some volatility. It is known for that these days and not disappointing this week. And unfortunately, all your Shiba holders, you were all excited. We had that 45% pop in 24 hours. Everyone was talking about the Shiba Lambos. Here we go. Giving some of that back this week down to a whopping 0.000029 from a whopping 3.2 this time last week. All right, everybody, that music means we've come to the end of our sojourn through the world of crypto derivatives. I want to thank our guest, Dan O'Prey from Bakkt. Again, good to finally have the Bakkt folks coming on the show to explain and explore their side of the crypto space. A lot of interesting things happening over there. There's been a lot of headlines over the course of the past year that maybe has obscured some of the more interesting product developments they have going on over there. The notion of this one wallet or perhaps this one platform where you could aggregate a lot of your holdings, not just crypto, but anything really digital in one place. There certainly is some interest to that. We'll see how that plays out in the marketplace. And I know for a lot of you out there are still holding out hope for those physically delivered, physically settled contracts. So hopefully maybe we'll see some evolutions on those, even though it doesn't sound like I'm talking to Dan. It doesn't sound like that's the focus going forward. It does sound like they're moving more towards the cash settled contracts and merging that with the other digital initiatives they have going on over there. But we'll keep an eye on them. Certainly we'll talk to them again in the future. Remember, if you want to kick the tires and light the fires on all these numbers we're talking about today and a whole bunch more, you need to go to gvol.io. Give them a follow on the old Twitters as well if you haven't done so already. They do a great newsletter, and they usually tweet it out every week, so you can take a look at exactly what's going on. They break down the skew, the term structure, and put it all out there for your education and indeed enjoyment out there. So give them a follow if you haven't done so already. We'll be back again tomorrow with another great pro Q&A session. So if you're in the secret club, we got our buddy Mr. JJ Kinahan, who holds down the fort over there at TD Ameritrade. He'll be joining us again for the first time here in the new year to answer all of your options questions. So get those in if you're on the pro side. If you're not, theoptionsinsider.com/secret club is the place to go. Back on Wednesday. For the audience of this show, I definitely recommend, if you're not listening to it, check out Options Bootcamp, Options Playbook Radio, our two primary educational shows here on the network. If you listen to those, it's all on demand. You can do so at your leisure and really just build up a stronger base, a stronger confidence for these markets. If you're listening to a show like this, you have a better understanding of what's going on out there. So I definitely encourage those. And if you're interested in how crypto maybe dovetails into the broader commodity perspective, from an options and derivatives outlook. Then, of course, This Week in Futures Options, we do that every Thursday with the folks over there at CME and FTSE Russell. That's a great dive into all this stuff. We often get into crypto there. It's usually leading our movers and shakers report every week in one direction or the other. Last week, it was number one to the upside, I do believe. So crypto does feature on that program very often as well. Friday, volatility views, and then we're back again next Monday with another episode of the Crypto Rundown. We'll see you then.
This program is brought to you by Genesis Volatility, also known as GVol, home of institutional-grade crypto options analytics. Whether you're trading CeFi options or DeFi options, cryptocurrencies move. Use GVol Analytics to analyze implied volatility, model realized volatility, structure positions, and unlock alpha. For more information, visit gvol.io. That's GVOL.io. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.